Hello.
Good
How
to
are
see
you?
you again today. I'm great. I'm great. It's a little bit of a gray day, and sometimes that brings people down. But to me, today I've totally been able to tap into my creative heart. And gray day be damned, I am not feeling it at all.
Yeah, find the rain inspiring myself. It's calming.
It's so quiet. A lot of people, they have trouble with it. They get trapped in the idea that it's a gray day, and they just can't seem to switch over to the idea that it's literally like a license to be creative. It's this quiet bubble to just go out and just create whatever you want to create, whether you're walking in the rain so you can think, or whether you're sitting at home and doing painting or anything like that.
hmm hmm
I wanted to ask you, I was doing a reading this week, and one of the things that came up was the creative heart. And since you're an aspiring artist as well as an accomplished artist, I wanted to ask you about empowerment and how you view the creative heart in empowerment. Because in the reading that I was having with this person, I was trying to explain how through their creative heart, for them, it was in particular, it was painting through painting with very bold colors, because colors do affect us. I was trying to explain to her how she can regain some of the trust that she used to have in herself. And she was having a bit of trouble getting the concept of it. And part of that is her blockage towards it. But you, as an artist, I figured maybe you would have better words on how to explain the idea of empowerment and the creative heart.
Yeah, I think that's a topic that's relevant to every artist and every creative person. Um, em- I definitely find that it's hand in hand with expectation, and there's a certain amount that we expect from ourselves, and it's through letting go of that expectation that I find that I can tap easier into that heart energy. Um, when I'm starting a piece, for sure, I try and do a variety of different things. Maybe meditating, maybe just a couple deep breaths. Sometimes before I start a piece that I really care about, I'll just do a test piece where I just go crazy and it's like a sketch, or it's just to let it all out and just to get the heart flowing, because if there's a piece I really care about, I might focus too much on my expectation, and then it's harder to hear from that heart voice and that empowerment voice if you're focused on what it's supposed to turn out like. So
I've met so many people who are blocked by the idea of what something is supposed to be. And, I try to tell them that, much like working with their creative heart in any form, whether you're cooking or knitting or, painting, etc., that there comes a point where you literally are in this lovely little bubble. But getting there is the hardest part, is to open the door. And sometimes you just have to trust. You just have to literally just not have that expectation, not have that belief that it must turn out a certain way, and go with the flow. It's really
mhm.
about flow and connectiveness, and so many people, so many artists who really go with the flow can really sometimes, I think, surprise themselves, and of course their families too, which is always funny. But they really can surprise themselves. And once they do, it's like they find within them this sense of empowerment, this sense of confidence, this sense of wonder again. Because as human beings, we get so bogged down by everything, we forget how to have our sense of wonder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head by saying the flow state, and it is about entering that flow state. I think even for creatives, for artists, and for businesses, even. I mean, I remember while I was studying business in university, there was several exercises that we did about creative intentioning and for drawing up creative ideas, and a lot of that had to do with preparing yourself to enter that flow state, and how we achieve that and how we can achieve it uh, more readily. Because for a lot of people, it just happens and they don't know exactly what they did to get there. So how do I get back there? And managing that, and yeah.
And it's funny because, you talk about that, and I so agree with you, because we have to realize that we must sit comfortably in our natural state. And I know Spirit had told me basically a little quote that I share with others, and it goes something like this. It's basically our whatever most comes naturally to us, we do not necessarily see as valuable. right? And so because it's such a natural state and we can do it, we don't think it's a big deal to others. But oftentimes, because we are each so unique and so beautiful as human beings, and so miraculously, awesomely flawed at the same time, we can really, explore that side of ourselves if we just give ourselves the freedom to sit down and try something new. We don't have to necessarily go back and be, shall we say, excellent at something. Let it morph, let it meld, let it come out the way it needs to, learn from that experience. And when we do that, we're less likely to be stressed in other areas of our life because we spent time just living in the flow.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What that made me, as you were talking, think of was working at the art center where I was at. I noticed a lot of artists separate their passion pieces from their production pieces, or they have this sometimes strong division between the work that they're doing to fulfill that heart energy versus the work that they're just doing to make money or just to get their name out there. And for me, I mean, the most exciting and sparking piece for myself as an artist and to look at other people's artwork is those pieces where they found that perfect meld between this is the heart and this is what I'm trying to achieve, because there is that certain amount of logic that gets in there and says, I kind of want it to look like a pear, but then your heart gets into it, and the combination of the two is where the masterpieces kind of form.
Would you happen to have any artists off the top of your head that you would recommend as examples of that?
One artist, and you can find her on Instagram for sure, is Nikki Green. And there's one specific piece that comes to mind while I was managing at the art center. She had a piece that she came into the office with one day, and it was just about like 5 by 7, not much bigger than a photograph. And it was a sheet music background. Maybe I'll put the image of it and put the links in the description to this video for you guys that want to follow up. But I still have it in my studio today, and I kept it in the office while the art center was there. It's an elephant is the silhouette, but the designs and the colors, so light, and the sheet music as the background, give you this totally light-hearted and inspiring dynamic to an animal that is so heavy. So for me, it spoke of so much heart energy, because when you think of the elephant physically, it's this very heavy thing. And then when I asked her about the piece, I was in love with it immediately. She, kind of said, "Oh, it's just one of the things that I made offhand, and I didn't, put that much effort into it." And I was like, "No, but this is the gold. This is where I could really feel the message from it, and I could feel her heart speaking through that piece, even though she was so close to it that she didn't really see that same value." And there's that moment of, and for me, almost trying to explain how powerful that really actually is, that heart energy that's coming through, that people don't realize because it was just the thing that they did, that they weren't focusing because they weren't focusing on the outcome.
Fascinating and totally understood from this side. I mean, when you're describing it, I can almost see the piece in my mind's eye, and the biggest word that comes up is literally poetic. It's a poetic piece. It literally, and the musical background to me, it almost sings to you, right? And the contrast, the way you describe it beautifully there, I get it. I totally get it. And I think that is what inspires others, but also intimidates them. So when we see other artists, what they create, and we see what they can create or what they have created, and its effect on us, I know as someone who doesn't always view my creative heart in certain specific ways, I, even myself, may find that a bit intimidating to actually get started and try to create something of my own, because I see other people, what they've created and what that has, the effect that it has on me, how emotional it makes me. And then I think, oh, I don't know if I could do that to inspire others.
Yeah, there's something that you mentioned twice there that's interesting, which is, it's just getting started, right? That taking that first step. I don't know how that appears in your practice or in the clients that you've worked with, but I think there's a lot to be said for just getting past that first barrier and just breaking into it.
Well, I mean, there is the work that I do, which is separate than from me and my creative heart, because for me and the work that I do, I literally have to sit in this vacant space, in this empty space. There's no judgment, there's no preconceived notions, there's none of my regular Ange Joe life informing any of that. It has to be very clean, vacant space. And I have no problem getting into that space because I do it literally every day with clients, right? But when it comes to my personal self, when I want to sit down and I want to create something, because I have such a volume, I don't know how to focus it. I don't know how to come down and say one thing or make one single point when I work with such flow every day on so many multitude of levels that when I try to actually sit down and say, aside from cooking, if I try to sit down and actually try to create something, if I was to grab some clay and try to make a particular item or a particular something of use, like perhaps I wanted something like a napkin ring, I don't know, kind of thing. If I wanted to actually sit down and create that for my table, I find that I get caught up in not being able to slow down and work through the process for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I struggle with that as well, I'd say. I mean, once you get into that flow state, it can definitely be overwhelming how much information you're presented with and which direction you could go. Um, Being partway through a painting and then go, oh, maybe I could paint it like this, or maybe I could paint it like this, or maybe I could do this, and it can definitely be much. Yeah.
I know in the work that I do, everything is to be in a state of balance. And people sometimes get a little bit, shall we say, misdirected as to what that idea is. They believe that balance is 50-50, when that's not true at all. Balance itself is an ever changing evolution. And so sometimes 90% and 10%, if we were to use percentages, is actually an achievable balance for you. Right? People don't realize that sometimes 90-10 is actually your balance. That works for you, right? And so when I think about trying to create something, when I try to think about sitting down and actually creating an item, I find that I may struggle with how I want it to turn out and how it does turn out, and then my own either elation or disappointment. And then so I have to reevaluate myself and see, where is my ego taking me? Where is my state of flow? Where is my sense of balance? Is the 90-10 in this particular thing like, it's 90% there and there's 10% not. When do we let go of that's enough? Because perfection is obviously not achievable, but yet sometimes other people who've created something, we look at their work and we think perfection,
Mm-hmm.
but we
Mm-hmm.
ourselves do not.
Yeah, absolutely. Or that perfect imperfection where you can get the imperfections are visible, but they still make the piece as a whole. I think those questions that you said, asking with the self-doubt and the, either disappointment or elation in myself are completely valid. And for me to kind of get past that block, because the doubt's always going to be there. I've recognized that, and the more that I recognize that, the easier it is to work with. But what gets me to move through it and past it is that I ask myself where the doubt is coming from and what kind of doubt is it. Because if I'm working on a piece and I get to a point where it may not turn out what I envisioned it as, why am I envisioning it as that? And what's stopping me from envisioning it as something else? If is it sometimes and often it's other people's expectations. For me, it's, I would be satisfied with it, but I want to push it one step further because so and so will think this of it, or so and so will not think this of it, and that can kind of get me caught up. So if I realize then to myself that I'm not making the piece for someone else's expectation, then that's when I can move through that and past it and just again return to that flow state.
Now it's interesting. That brings up something else for me as you're talking, and that would be you talk about, what would so and so think of this? And so I want to ask you, do you find that there's artists that literally can't seem to make a decision on what they're making unless they poll their friends or poll their family, that kind of thing, and then they can go forward? Like, have you met ones that are so free flowing, they live outside of the box completely all the time to the point where people don't understand them. And then the other ones that are literally afraid to make a move. And how is it that each of those groups need to come around? Like what kind of things can they explore within the mediums, or what would you recommend to them in order to get them to basically both switch camps, so to speak, to get a degree of balance?
Right. Um, I mean, like I said before, I always recommend having like a scrap piece on the go, something that you aren't doing for a commission, you aren't doing it to submit to a show, you aren't doing it for any other reason than to let your whatever's on your mind out. I think that's definitely one of my suggestions. That's something I've used for myself and something that I've suggested to others as well. Um, and in terms of the opinions of our friends, it's, when you go to school to study artwork, your marks are based on critiques, right? There is this expectation that the way that your art is going to be received is going to be through those discussions and through the opinions of others, because there's the debate that once we release our art into the world, we as artists have no say over its meaning or its interpretation, because that's all on the other person's interpretation. So I think some people get bound up in that. Yeah, I don't.
I actually had never heard of the idea of having a piece on the go. I love that idea. I'm absolutely going to use that when I'm doing sessions where I talk to people about, the energy around having the piece on the go and the idea of that and that experimentation and, sort of like the jump off the cliff thing. And even myself personally, I'm also going to use that. So I thank you very much for that. I'd never heard of that, quite honestly. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that have, but I haven't. And I find that very valuable. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd equate it like if you're not a painter or an artist. I mean, even free writing. I'll do that if I need to do a writing piece, a composition, an essay, anything. I'll start off and always keep on the side a scrap piece of paper that's just for the ideas that come through. Because when you're getting into that flow state, it's hard to differentiate what's still the normal state and what's coming through as the flow state. So if you can keep those flow state things, they might not be relevant to the piece you're really trying to work on, but if you can keep it going on the side, yeah, it can be a useful tool.
yeah, and in the realm that I work in, myself, I write affirmations, intentions, manifestations, etc., that kind of thing. And I find that I have to literally start with a piece of paper and a pen, and in a form of almost like automatic writing. I let go of any expectation of what should be written there or what form it's supposed to follow or whether or not, it's grammatically correct, etc. And I just let it flow. And I mean, trying to read it, the writing's atrocious, but, just basically, you just let it go without the expectation. And it's amazing how beautiful what can come out. It's just stunning sometimes.
By whose definition is it atrocious, though? Or is that your inner doubt, doubting what you've
Well,
just
the atrocious part is my ability to write and flow at the same time. It's like scrolly, loopy, kind of thing. But as long as I get the gist of it when I'm trying to read it, I pity if anybody had to transcribe it. It just wouldn't work. But the state of flow is such a wonderful, beautiful, inherent birthright of every human being walking on this earth. Like we literally can tap into the state of flow. Some people call it divinity, whatever you're comfortable with, and we can as long as we live there to a degree, because we also can get lost there, which is an entirely different subject, right? But as long as we live there to a degree, we can create within ourselves a sense of balance. We need that. We crave it. As much as we need connection, we also need to be in the state of flow.
On that note, and just thinking about the flow state, for people who may feel like they've never reached that state before, I just want to clarify and say that, I don't start glowing rainbow or anything like that when you get to the flow state. Sometimes it can be in really simple little things, like as you're working on a piece, sometimes it's just that you don't know whether to make a line more curved or more straight, and a voice tells you as you're making it, or you feel your hand be guided for 2 seconds even out of a piece, you've achieved that state. So I don't want people to have this assumption that it's grandiose and you're glowing when it happens. It's sometimes about just listening and feeling for those smaller cues and when things just feel right too.
And that's the funny thing is that I know myself when I've tried my hand at creating things, and usually I go to cooking because there's so much room to just play. And it's the joy of play, like bringing the joy of play back into your life in some form. And the creative heart helps with that, right? And I know sometimes I'll create something and then I stand back when I'm done and I'm just like, wow, I don't know who did that, but that's pretty good, right? I'm just like, wow, that's pretty good, right? And I think that is probably my most fun moments with creating is when I can stand back and go, I'm not really sure how I accomplished that, but that's damn good.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. Sometimes it even feels like it was a different person, like it wasn't even yourself. But I think that's kind of the mark of knowing that you've reached that state, and it is the most purest form of yourself too.
Agreed. I thank you so much for your time today, Laura.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure to have this discussion. And we would both love if anyone else wants to add in their opinions and their thoughts on anything we talked about today. I'd love to hear it and continue on the discussion. How do you guys reach your heart, and what's been your experience with that?
Agreed. Thank you so much. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you.